basically within overnight, like within just a handful of days, we went from
Right.
not being able to find anything to nothing being there. The DatPiff archive is gone.
Now, what we do have this tonight, which is different than other nights, is a bit of actual breaking news, and it has to do with a very important aspect of hip hop culture, particularly when we talk about history and archiving. We're talking about tonight is the DatPiff Hip Hop Mixtape Archive. Peace to Bob Knutson, checking in from Wisco, Wisconsin, in the house. What up? What up, Bob? Thanks for checking in. This is an interesting story. This will be of interest to folks who don't really care too much about hip hop and people who love hip hop with all their heart. For those that don't know, any of the uninitiated or need to be reminded, datpiff.com was a website that existed for, much of the 2000s as an online destination where artists would upload their mixtape albums. We can go back a little bit more into history and talk about the history of mixtapes some other time, but the mixtape was, generally speaking, a curated by a DJ compilation of songs that would be put together on a CD, a cassette originally, a CD, and then distributed to the masses. It was an unofficial release. It was not something that was sanctioned by record labels. It became an industry all of itself, probably billion-dollar industry of mixtapes. You've heard people like DJ Clue and DJ Drama and all these big name DJs that literally made a career and an industry out of selling mixtapes. Now, these were physical mixtapes back in the days that, such things existed. They really came to life with cassettes. It's actually how hip hop proliferated and propagated throughout the land. Mixtapes, right? You'd have people recording off the radio, cassette tapes rather. You'd have people recording off the radio. You'd have people recording from live battles and the shows, and those cassettes would be dubbed and duplicated and spread and sent down out of to your cousin down in DMV or your brother stationed in Germany overseas, and that's how hip hop really proliferated throughout the world. So mixtapes have been always very, very important to hip hop culture. Of course, it also, again, because artists would be putting things out on mixtapes sometimes that the record labels wouldn't sanction or wouldn't, be give it co-signing. You'd have a lot of really original, interesting experimentation, samples that wouldn't be cleared, but you could rhyme over on a mixtape because it's kind of a pseudo legal situation going on. You have some songs that only exist in mixtape form, that the only time you could have gotten that song from this artist who was maybe a nobody, it became somebody, and this was an early, introduction to the world, was on the mixtapes. Drake would be one of the most notorious of these folks that came from this mixtape era, which then coincided with the blog era as everything migrated online. And shouts to It's The Real, the two-man journalist crew that went ahead and put out a great podcast series about the blog era. You had a period of time when everything was moving online. Mixtapes were less physical. They were more being passed around online. Songs were being uploaded to websites. The proliferation of online hubs where you could get your new mixtapes, Two Dope Boys, Nah Right, like these sites were just iconic places that helped churn this new generation of hip hop on a global scale. So the mixtapes, which used to be physical, then transitioned online, became part of this blog era, became part of the mixtape era. And datpiff.com, along with a couple of other sites, was sort of like arose as the place where you would upload a mixtape. And very often, like I said, you're not making any money off of this. Artists doing this for promotional purposes. Very often, maybe they're just starting out and they're trying to find, listenership. They're trying to find folks to listen to them, a place that you could send a link and, have people listen to your mixtape. Sometimes very big famous artists would put their mixtapes up on DatPiff, and it would maybe create buzz for an official album that was coming out. It was big. It was big. It went on almost until very recently. Earlier this year, for example, if you remember, I reported on. Oh, and Andrew says like the old school SoundCloud. Sure, it basically opened up the what do you call it, the lane for like SoundCloud rap. That whole era of being able to release yourself independently without having to go through record labels. Anyone could record in their house, do a few songs on SoundCloud, then compile them onto a mixtape and put them up. I have a mixtape of remixes. I don't think it's on DatPiff. Actually, I think mine is on Bandcamp. But again, Bandcamp would be a little bit more of a structured, pay for money, and we can get transactions. So, but DatPiff sort of opened up this world, and again, many big artists became big really because of blogs and sites like DatPiff. Up until recently, we talked about this again. I reported on this earlier this year, back in January. There was problems with the website. The website was crashing. There was concerns that the archive of all the music that was being stored on DatPiff, terabytes and terabytes worth of albums, would be lost, would be gone. And they then linked up with the Internet Archive. Y'all might know the Internet Archive as the home of the Wayback Machine. Sometimes you got to go back and look to see a website that existed in the past. Maybe it doesn't exist now. Maybe it looks different. Maybe you got to check a lying politician for something they said back in the days about being a black Nazi or whatever. Just hypothetically, whatever. I mean, what a weird example. That would never happen. So you would go in the Wayback Machine. That's the Internet Archive. They own that, but they also store a lot of online digital information. It's built to be this sort of, I think the analogy we made was the Library of Alexandria, this home base for all this information to be stored and protected against a service like Bandcamp going out of business, and then all your stuff is gone. DatPiff.com having hard drive crashes, or maybe being taken offline for some other reason. All the stuff is being held. And the Internet Archive was supposed to be this very heralded place where this stuff would be secure and safe. Different somehow. I don't actually quite fully understand. Different than any other organization that might then go out of business. So, we know of the Internet Archive because this deal happened. Now it's tied to hip hop, and we're like, oh, the Internet Archive. That's cool. They're hosting all of the stuff from DatPiff.com in January. So according to Rolling Stone, in January, DatPiff began uploading its entirety of it. Well, the entirety, asterisk on that, we'll talk about that in a minute, of its over 420. Come on, that's not a coincidence. Rap mixtape collection to the Internet Archive. And that's great. Since then, DatPiff site, and ever since then, has said, embrace the next generation of DatPiff. And it links over to there, and it says, go to the archive.org, go to archive.org, and you can do all that. So just the other day, I was on Reddit, and I noticed there was a discussion being led by a user, Ayo Rhett, who said, hey, y'all, so the Internet Archive of DatPiff.com's archive is disappearing. And no one seemed to know this, and no one seemed to have noticed this. And then a bunch of people went in, and it was at 366,000, right? And then it was like 285,000, and then like 122,000, and it just kept dwindling. And really over the course of a day or two, it's gone. So there is, as of now, unless there's something that we're all freaking missing, there is nothing in the DatPiff hip-hop mixtape archives on the Internet Archive. Gone. No explanation. DatPiff hasn't said anything. I reached out to the Internet Archive myself after finding this out, and nothing. So we don't know what's happening. Nobody knows what's happening. So I said, well, listen, you did some really cool, like, unofficial journalism work, Mr. Ayo Rhett, on Reddit, random Reddit user. How would you like to come on and tell me about it? So I invited him, and he came, and we talked, and I'm going to share that interview with you. He is a radio show host and a self-declared hip-hop nerd, rap nerd, who has been following the DatPiff saga for a long time. And he essentially broke this story, as far as I can tell, anywhere in the world. And as far as I can also tell, I'm the first person to then bring it as a journalist, as a hip hop guy. So the two of us together, breaking news. Here's my discussion with Richard, my man, my mellow, from up north in Canada, eh? Who told us all about the disappearing mixtape archive. Let's go. Richard, thanks for joining me on this very impromptu connection that we made in the fair streets of Reddit USA. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm doing well. We're preparing for a show, so it's always a little bit wild, but I'm just glad you took time to talk to me about this little incident that you essentially reported on. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll have told people a little bit about why we're talking, but just to kind of recap very briefly, what I noticed is that you noticed and posted to Reddit, and then as far as I know, you're the only one or the first one, but certainly the first one I came across, that noted that the DatPiff hip-hop mixtape archives that were previously held on DatPiff.com that had been transferred to the Internet Archive, the sort of what's the Library of Alexandria of the internet.
Right now it is.
And had been there for some time since earlier this year. It was big news. I remember reporting on it. 300 something thousand mixtapes, terabytes and terabytes of storage, suddenly was disappearing.
Yep.
Just trickling away. And you noticed this. Why?
I noticed it because I check the archive on a weekly basis. The preservation of DatPiff has always been quite important to me, and what they had uploaded to Internet Archive was in no way all of what they had. That 366,000 was basically a small portion. It was the premier mixtape site from 2005 to 2022, still taking uploads up to the day that the website started malfunctioning. And so I've always been concerned about the preservation of DatPiff, and so I was keeping an eye on it, regularly checking. And essentially what ended up happening was this week, there was a night where it was still at 300 some thousand. The next day, it was down to 100 some thousand, and then we saw it just kind of going down and down and down. Now, initially, a few commenters noted that this seemed to be an indexing issue. The ability to find items was being curtailed, but that the items still seemed to be there. And so I grabbed a number of downloads that I had been
direct links, for example, like you could still, if you had a direct link, you'd still be able to get to it, but you couldn't search for it.
And then another user named Tack, he let me know, he said, hey, heads up, I can't get any of my direct links anymore. And so I went and checked. All of them are gone. Basically only a few hours after I managed to finish the downloads that I needed. And so, yeah, basically overnight, within just a handful of days, we went from not being able to find anything to nothing being there. The DatPiff archive is gone.
It's gone. There was some speculation amongst the folks. I've reached out to the Internet Archive. I think you mentioned that you might have been in touch with DatPiff. What is your interest or history in wanting to preserve or watchdogging the preservation? Is there some connection? Are you somebody?
No, I'm not anybody. I'm just a rap nerd, and DatPiff means a lot to me.
Yes, absolutely.
To me. It still means a ton to me. And so by reaching out to DatPiff, I was just contacting them through their help desk or whatnot. Basically they say you can contact us. And so I've been doing that. They've said like 2 different people have responded. I don't know if those people actually work there, if it's AI or something else. So whatever the case is, I've occasionally sent emails just saying, hey, what's going on? Why has there been absolutely no communication? Because DatPiff has said nothing. Basically, since that initial announcement, they didn't comment on why uploads stopped. They didn't. They haven't commented on any of what's going on in terms of why the archive has disappeared. The speculation right now is that it has to do with the Internet Archive's legal issues, and certainly that is the theory to my mind that makes sense. And so, with no real word on anything, though, we're completely in the dark. And so, I've bugged DatPiff. I've occasionally tweeted at them from my personal Twitter, but nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, I didn't get a response back. Like I said, we emailed the Internet Archive, I guess, very, very early today, or kind of overnight into today. Haven't heard anything back. I don't know if we would expect something that fast. If the Internet Archive is something that's staffed on a 24-hour basis, I'm not sure how exactly how it works.
Not only that, but given the legal issues that the archive is facing. They've had the fallout from their lawsuits, from book publishers, music publishers,
movies.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they've probably got their hands full legally right now. And one comment that was left just today, from Lord High IQ the third, about 11 hours ago, they're indicating that they think that there was a mediation between the archives lawyers and music industry lawyers last week, stemming from a lawsuit that was launched last year for like
Yeah.
$400 million regarding old records that were uploaded.
Mhm.
I have a feeling right now there's probably all sorts of legalese that's going to make it very difficult to get answers for a
Yeah.
while. But it would be very nice if DatPiff would at least confirm that the original archive and collection still exists somewhere. We don't even have that
Yeah.
confirmation.
Yeah, interesting, because like you said, their site eventually started malfunctioning, or there was some, I guess it was left to be, it was uncertain whether datpiff.com, the site, would actually exist in its former state at all. And then the worry was that it was all gone. It was just gone. Maybe it exists offline somewhere. No one really was sure of that, to my knowledge. And then the Internet Archive deal came about, and it was like, salvation, like all this stuff is being preserved somewhere, but possibly not.
Salvation with very little information. I think that's the best
Right.
way to characterize it.
Right. Well, we've talked on this show, and I've worked with some folks that are in the preservation business. In fact, I just want to give a huge shout out to Summer McCoy, who runs the Mixtape Museum,
Okay.
which is an initiative to digitize cassettes mostly, cassette mixtapes or CD mixtapes that had existed in physical form that necessarily may not have made it to the digital realm. But also in that same vein, in that same spirit, is to preserve all of hip hop, musical, compilations, that would be deemed a mixtape. And of course, like you mentioned, the DatPiff Archives was the premier spot. Just curious, you said it means a lot to you personally. If you don't mind me asking, sort of, what was your introduction? What was your connection to it from a music fan, rap nerd level? What did DatPiff's existence mean to you, and how did it sort of incorporate itself into your life?
Basically, I grew up in rural Ontario. I started listening to hip hop in
Okay.
2002, but I grew up in rural Ontario. And
Okay.
so it was very difficult for quite a while to keep up with any hip hop culture beyond sort of music videos and what I heard on the radio and whatever CDs I could buy.
Right.
Around
Nothing out there in like Kitchener,
Yeah.
like that.
Yep,
Yeah.
outside of Kitchener. We didn't
Yeah.
even have high speed here until 2007, and we had a
Yeah.
100 megabyte a day limit. And so I knew about the iTunes store. I started building more of
Yeah.
a collection from buying from there. And unfortunately, I missed the 2009 Double XL freshman cover, but I did get the 2010 cover. And
Okay.
so when they're talking about Freddie Gibbs, Big Sean, Pill, I'm sitting there looking at the projects they have, and I'm saying, "What the? Where do I get these? I can't find Straight Killa No Fill on iTunes. I can't find 1140,
Right.
the overdose, or 4075, the refill. Finally Famous 3. Where are these?" And so I start looking online. That's when I discovered Two Dope Boys. That was like uncovering just a whole new world. And then
Absolutely.
obviously from there, DatPiff. And it was
Right.
just like, I can download all of these mixtapes, discover new artists at any given moment, connect
Yeah.
with other people who are either complaining about these records or celebrating these records. It was usually complaining on DatPiff, but that's how it goes.
Right.
But essentially, this whole world of the free mixtape opened up to me. And it was
Yeah.
just like, wait a minute, I can have ownership of these files. I can have control of these. This is stuff that's out there for free. This is stuff that the artists are doing. All the experimentation that people are doing on
Yeah.
DatPiff, rapping over indie rock, electronic, those early mixtape days of freestyling over everything. It was
Yeah.
just a whole new world. And for someone like me who just in this rural community had no real other connection with hip hop besides what I was just doing myself, because out here it was country rock, it was, country and whatnot. My parents were
Yeah.
into classical and all that and classic rock. And so there
Yeah.
just really wasn't that community out here. And so being able to discover that online, it was just mind blowing. And so from there, I was still checking in on DatPiff, still downloading up to the day it started acting up. And so that's why it's just that very personal passion for me. And there are so many artists that I've discovered. And I do host a small
Mm.
radio show on a public station up here. And I do a once a month segment called All Things Considered, where I highlight a certain artist. And some of
Yeah.
these artists are just those who I discovered on DatPiff.
Oh, so you are somebody. You do things. Stop it. So you do things. That's a thing.
All right,
That's
I'll
dope.
grant I do some things occasionally.
That's dope. That's super dope. You said you were still using it sort of, up until recently, up until it kind of faded out. How active was it still, like in comparison to how it had been in the blog era, in the mixtape era? Like, was it still active enough?
I mean, put it like this. Obviously, when streaming services came and rose to power in 2015 and 16 and changed
Sure.
the musical landscape, yeah, you weren't getting big artists uploading there or whatnot. But the thing is, and I say this because I help out with the radio station in terms of getting music submissions from smaller artists were still uploading wherever they could. And
Yeah.
so even live mixtapes, it's a small site, but it's still getting uploads on the daily. And DatPiff was still getting plenty of uploads. You had international artists who were uploading there. You had those who basically were just continuing on. Benny Revival was a slightly bigger artist who was still uploading on DatPiff all the time.
Mm,
Basically, artists who were getting started out, who existed at the smaller scale in certain niche scenes, they still were putting music up there. And so while it was nowhere near, like back in the day, like you would have pages upon pages of new stuff on DatPiff. There's that one
right.
Childish Gambino bar, I think from Think of Me, where he's just like, Dat Piff fourth page because you suck something glory hole. Like there was just so much coming
Right.
out at that time. It was obviously nowhere near that scale, but it was
Yeah.
still active in a way that
Yeah.
it's collapsed. I'm sure hurt some artists. I'm sure hurt some small niche communities.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've been frustrated with that Piff's complete lack of communication because it's more than just those big mixtapes. There are these smaller niche segments that still exist in these spaces that when you lose sight of them and they lose the ability to function, you
Yeah.
you you don't help hip hop culture in that way. And I fear that Piff, despite the prominence as that it has had and the importance it has, in some ways its lack of communication has also really hindered understanding where the culture is and all the different ways that it sort of exists and manifests.
Yeah, yeah, these personal connections, obviously the legacy of artists, the sort of like the timeline of artistry can be traced through some of these touch points, these digital touch points, and that's super important. Summer, again, who runs the Mixtape Museum, and just shout it out. It's a nice organization. This is up your alley. You might just want to know who they are and keep an eye on them. I think it's mixtapemuseum.org, but just Google Mixtape Museum, and she's working on preservation, like I say, audio digitization, and all these wonderful ways to try and help these issues. She's a friend of the show and want to big her up. She always asks for as she's starting to collect people's mixtape memories. So on behalf of the Mixtape Museum, one of the questions I know they would want to ask is, and I know you just gave me a flurry of ways, but what's your mixtape memory? It could be anything.
Oh man.
And when you hear that, what does that sound like to you?
The sheer variety of things I could pull from. But I'll give an example that I talked about just a couple weeks ago because this is one that means a lot to me. There was a Chicago rapper named Julian Malone, and he unfortunately passed away this past summer. And so that's why I've been thinking about him a lot recently. Back around 2011, his crew, the 2080s crew, Kels, Fonzie Mac, aka Emil, Legit, UG, their producer Sani, they were kind of making waves on the blog space. They were pre the Save Money era of Chicago.
Okay.
And anyway, Julian Malone, he debuted this one song called October 20th that if you heard it, it stayed with you. And this was the lead up to a project that was hosted by two dope boys called Enemy, The Time and Loves of Julian Malone. And to my mind, it is still one of the best mixtapes of 2012. In fact, one of the best projects. And that was a stacked year. But I would put it up there. It was this deeply personal sort of bearing of the soul. His production was excellent. His sample flips. He introduced me to King Cruel. I had no idea who King Cruel was at the time, and that was when Cruel went by Zoo Kid, actually. But he had pulled a sample there. The beats were excellent, and I will always hold on to that tape. Like I listen to it multiple times a year. It still can take me back to what was a very difficult time in my life, and it was a difficult time in his, and it was being able to connect through those lyrics that really helped out. And so for many years, unfortunately, though, Enemy was inaccessible because he basically disappeared after that point.
Okay.
He disappeared. And so, unfortunately, when Two Dope Boys' Mediafire account lapsed, their hosting of that went.
Mediafire. Wow.
Going.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
Right,
Then
yeah.
DatPiff going didn't help either. And so, essentially, a tape was inaccessible. When the archive came back, very briefly, that tape was accessible again. So were some of Kels's early tapes, stuff that, was not searchable. And had DatPiff not stopped uploading, I think some of Malone's other earlier projects that I don't have probably would have resurfaced as well. We know Upstate Rebel Rollin' and Noise were two projects that existed prior to they're being removed from DatPiff because the archive wasn't really considering whether or not projects had been deleted from the site. It was just uploading everything. It allowed me to
Okay.
find so much stuff that had essentially been missing for years. Michael
Wow.
Christmas's Free is this albums. Sean Christopher's I Wear Glasses #2, which had gone missing. And so anyway,
Mm,
Julian Malone is kind of to me the perfect encapsulation of the importance of the mixtape era because he released something that was truly album quality that only a small handful of people knew. And regardless of the numbers, regardless of whether or not he had that big fan base going on, he
yeah.
was there as a person who
Yeah.
made this music, who put it out there, who bared his soul, and who left a mark on those who did, keep up with him. And to lose that piff and the archive is not just about losing the music, but it's about losing both the understanding of American culture and history at that time, especially that era of the Great Recession, and then, onward, coming out of it, and understanding how people formulated and developed their musical identities, and also just our records of many individuals who probably put their heart and soul into a project, moved on from hip hop, and, that's the only real record we have of them now outside of their friends and families. And so I think about all of that when I listen to Enemy. And so that I'll put forward as my main mixtape memory, though I could
Nah.
so many more.
Nah, I'm sure you can. I can tell already. But that is brilliant and that is really well said. And I think it strikes to the core of the type of talk we do here, just wanting folks to remember that there's more to this thing, than what a lot of people think, that there are connections. There's humanity all strewn throughout the music and culture. And that's a really
Exactly.
it's a profound way of putting it. So I appreciate that. What would you hope, as I don't want to keep you too long, what would you hope? And you made mention, you did say, I think maybe it was before we jumped on, you said that what the Internet Archive, and you just made sort of alluded to it, what the Internet Archive have still wasn't everything that DatPiff had. So to your knowledge, DatPiff had an assortment. Things were deleted from DatPiff, but still existed, and they made its way to the Internet Archive. Do you have an idea? I mean, you seem to know a little bit about this, how much they actually have or had at one point?
So someone uploaded about 10 years ago to the Internet Archive. This document is still accessible. I can pull it up.
Right. I saw. Yeah.
A new link, but basically an archive of just cover arts that were
The covers. Mm-hmm. I saw it. Yeah.
600,000. Okay.
Right.
That's way back. That's way back. So that's just the cover art. There was also a document of just what was uploaded, I think, from 2013 to 14, 2,000 some pages. There's no way that I think even that encapsulates everything DatPiff had, because you had stuff that got deleted that they were obviously still storing, given what what did get pulled back up. And again,
and when you say deleted, would this be like lawsuit stuff or just
even just artists deleting it? So for
taking
example,
it down themselves.
In the case of Michael Christmas, he had two projects before Is This Art, fucking EP and The Golden Toilet. And I think he was very much still finding his voice. And so I have a feeling he just kind of deleted those prior to Is This Art, because Is This Art was like the big debut project. And so, the
music equivalent of deleting all your Instagram and starting over again.
Exactly. Stuff like that. And so, I respect that artists do that. I respect they have reasons. It also, though, later on, you can go back to those and see the development and go, oh, wow, this artist really evolved in their sound. It's actually all the more impressive. I respect his art even more now. And I love that album. And I love it even more seeing just how he evolved as a musician, as a rapper. My own personal estimate, and again, I don't have quite enough to really be able to say exactly, but I certainly would think it would be more than 1 million tapes, because there was so much stuff that people knew wasn't there. Like, a lot of Currency's discography still wasn't there. There were all sorts of tapes I knew were there at one point that weren't in the archive. And when we just consider from 2005 to 2022, I don't see how it could be under 1 million. Again, that's just a guess. I may be completely
No, I get it. But no, it's based on some observations. So we'll take it as an educated guess.
I think it would be in there. And I mean, something that I think was unfortunate too in DatPiff's lack of communication is just giving some sense of how much they did have left to upload before things suddenly stopped. Because that was the thing that was always in those automated email responses I got. They said, we will upload everything. we will get everything. And when they have that kind of tone and they stopped at like 300 some thousand, you have to wonder how much further away were they? How much more was
Yeah.
there left to do? Because it was a very sudden cancellation. It was a very sudden stop.
Yeah.
So to my mind, it has to be somewhere in that upper range.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so much that gets lost.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of this is that even even more could get lost than we imagine, and then we're already possibly losing a lot. Although, again, legal things happen; they may still exist somewhere. I guess it's unknown if there's a a vault of hard drives somewhere offline in a bunker, in DatPiff land, where that
If
has
they would
everything.
if they would just send out one tweet saying, "Look,
Yeah,
folks, all of our original files are safely stored offline. We won't tell you where, but they are offline. We can confirm it."
right.
I would feel such a wave of relief. Just that
Yeah.
little bit of confirmation would be helpful.
That's interesting. Yeah, I get it. There was something about a guy, and this was again, this was all very late breaking news, and so I apologize. Something about a guy in a Mastodon account, talking
Yeah,
about trusting him.
the founder of the
It's
Internet Archive.
right, Joe Scott, something Scott.
Yeah,
I'm going off of memory, and
yeah,
he
I'm
was
going
asked
off
about it, and he basically said, "You just have to trust me."
Yep.
Which again is as cryptic as anything could possibly be. My guess is that if the Internet Archive wanted to preserve this, they did this. I mean, it's an altruistic endeavor in in its entirety to some degree, that he would want to make sure that this is okay, and that if there was some behind the scene machinations going on, legal stuff happening, that might be his answer, because there's only so much you could say. But again, yeah.
He's probably stuck there, and I think he's got to think about. I think the Internet Archive, they're balancing between preserving the Wayback Machine and preserving all those uploaded files outside of the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine is essential for trying to keep up any record, basically, of the internet right now.
Sure.
Archive.ph.
Right.
They're probably balancing, and
Yep.
if you've got multiple industries saying we're tired of you, we're going to sue the living hell out of you. I mean, a $400 million some lawsuit over old records, some of them being 78 RPMs, they're not making those finals anymore.
Right.
When they're willing to threaten
Right.
that, I'm sure they've got to look and say, we've got to balance it. My own belief, the mentality of the internet the last few years has been, if something needs to be backed up, get it over to the Internet Archive, put it there.
Right.
I have a feeling we got to change our mentality to get everything downloaded off the Internet Archive sometime soon. Movies, TV shows, music.
How interesting that it's now the reverse of get everything digitized, and now we got to undigitize, print out all those photographs.
Yeah, get everything backed up physically again, offline, whatever you need. Offline storage remains the absolute essential.
Sure.
If you don't have it backed up at a few different points offline,
it doesn't exist.
Hard drives, yeah, it's vulnerable.
Doesn't,
it's very vulnerable. It's vulnerable even if you have the physical. I mean, I manage some physical hard drives. It's a pain in the ass. Anytime the board starts acting up, I'm always worried. But given how unstable things have gotten in the online space and online preservation, we have to have that mentality of storing offline. I think a lot of people, and this comes from sort of the move to convenience culture that streaming services really imposed upon us, and many people jumped on, and they jumped on that bandwagon. There is no preservation that is ever going to be truly convenient and just simple and pleasant. The efforts to preserve culture are always going to be a pain in the ass, one way or another. You're going to suffer. You're going to get frustrated. There's no real way to do it otherwise. But I think we are reaching a crisis point. We are at a crisis point in preserving hip hop culture where we have to decide to suffer a little bit if there's going to be any preservation, or we have to decide to suffer the consequences. If we want to just let everything be streaming service, be totally corporate oriented, and let these algorithms control everything, okay, but we got to make that conscious decision, and we have to accept it. We have to accept also the consequences of it. Everything that we lose as a process and as a result. If we were going to lose the mixtape era, if we're going to lose even some CD culture that kind of came before that, then, we have to accept that we don't really respect all parts of hip hop culture. And we have to sort of accept that, because there's just such callous indifference right now. If there were more conscious efforts to preserve so much more, and I think if there were a healthier discourse surrounding what should and should not be preserved, because hip hop culture, obviously, it can be very isolated at points. You have your old heads versus your young heads. You have your
Sure.
underground versus your mainstream,
Right.
and almost all sides get a little bit feisty about whether the other side should be preserved.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think that does contribute then to a limited view of what should be preserved and what should be paid attention to. I know DJs who are very old school and have no idea what DatPiff is. That
Mm.
whole world is just something alien to them. It's where your
Yep.
Travis Porters, your Waka Flockas are. That's not
Yep.
real hip hop. So, who
Right.
cares
So
about
right.
it?
So exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Dismissive.
and
Yeah.
then they don't pay attention to what else is there, and as a result, it's very fragmented and very fractured right now. And
Yeah.
I think any effort to try to, we're not going to be able to reverse course fully, but I think to try to do anything better than what we really have, that does require recognizing that we sometimes have to get over our own sort of cultural sensibilities,
Yep.
be willing to engage with what's going on in the other realms, at least to preserve it. And also that recognition that it's not going to be easy, it's not going to always be fun, but if you're going to preserve culture in any way, you have to accept that.
And again, brilliantly said. I really appreciate your perspective. You've thought about this a lot. As I always say, we can't throw away the totality of hip hop culture, baby, with the bias against mumble rap bathwater. And so
Best way to put it.
yeah, so we're on the same page. I agree with you 100%. I really appreciate your insight on this. Thanks for bringing this, obviously, to the Reddit community and bringing light to this. Staying, abreast of it and just doing your civic duty as a hip hop citizen. This is the kind of stuff we love to talk about. Shed light on. Please give anyone watching, just whatever you want people to know about you and where you do your thing and how to reach out to you and follow up if you feel like you want to put yourself out there like that.
Sure. So I'll do just promo for the small radio show that I do. So I do a show called the Cleanup Hour. It's a 2-hour hip hop show, mostly hip hop show, over at CKMS 102.7. I also do have a SoundCloud. Let me just make sure I have the SoundCloud.com/mophead-1027. You can check out the archives of what I do there.
That's what's up.
Basically, I'll be talking about blog era stuff, putting on artists, playing new stuff, playing old stuff, just kind of whatever I feel like each week. So basically, I do that show. I have another show there as well called the Rise and Broadening Hour. I dedicate 2 hours to play music that's submitted to our station. And so basically 4 hours a week of music, if you're that desperate for someone else to curate, because I think right now people miss curation from anything other than algorithms. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, I might be, of interest or not. I do have a Twitter for the station itself, Cleanup Hour 1027. No dashes, nothing like that there. That's just Twitter I use for the station or for my show, and you can interact with me there and whatnot. And yeah, if you look at the Reddit posts on DatPiff, you can obviously message me through there.
That's what's up. And of course, so your show is streamable, yeah?
Yep.
Ah, fantastic.
On SoundCloud, and also on radiowaterloo.ca, there will be also archives there. They're in 128 kilobytes per second. They're not the cleanest sounding, but that is what it is. So
hey, man, it's gritty. That's what we like. Again, it's all hip hop, man. Give us some 12-bit radio. It's all good. Thank you. I appreciate it. This show is called Hip Hop Can Save America, but we're certainly welcome to have our good friends up, from up north doing the same kind of work we're doing. And I just appreciate you, man. Let's keep an eye on this situation as it develops. We're now friends on Reddit, and now you know about this show. And I think there'll be some things on here that you might like from time to time. So
forward to going through it.
Let's stay in touch, man.
Definitely.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. There you have it. My man, Richard, radio host and Reddit user, Ayo Rhett. Ayo.
Ayo.
Ayo Rhett on Reddit, who discovered that the DatPiff.com archive of hip-hop mixtapes that previously existed on DatPiff.com that had been migrated in large but not maybe totality to the Internet Archive, archive.org, and had been living there to much fanfare since the beginning of the year, disappeared the other day and is now gone.
Manny Faces. You sick for this one.